Channel open. Welcome back to Weekly Trek, a Star Trek news podcast presented by TrekCore.com. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show is recorded on April 26, 2026, and is current through Star Trek Starfleet Academy Season 1, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
Weekly Trek is a regular news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in the Alex Kurtzman era of Star Trek, with the 12th television show currently in production, and 14 movies to enjoy, and merchandise continuing to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is returning guest Peter Hong. Peter, welcome back to Weekly Trek.
Hello, hey Alex, great to be here. It's always a pleasure and honor to be on Weekly Trek.
All right, Peter, well, you know the drill. I want to know something's got you excited about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
Okay, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the Star Trek Voyager Homecoming comics that got released last year. So, I mean, one thing, when I remember watching Endgame back in the day, one thing I always wanted was a few, maybe 15, 20 minutes of them arriving on Earth, interacting with Admiral Paris and Reg, and just starting to adjust into the sort of the next phase of the life. And then we never got that. And so when the comics was announced, I was curious about it because I was wondering if they would do that. And I did read the Homecoming books. There was that 2-volume book series that came out a while back, and it was okay. And they had those scenes. And I was curious how the comics,
the Borg virus, right?
Yeah, that's what it is. So, and so they did something like, well, I guess without getting too much into spoilers, but I kind of thought the comics, I enjoyed them, and it was a little bit like, almost like a spiritual successor to Scorpion. It had like some similar themes. So I really enjoyed doing them, reading them, and I was a little bit surprised that they would kind of bring that back. I was glad that they did, even though the Voyager has been a series that's been, have ended for so many years. So I just hope that they would sort of continue maybe bringing some of these other untold stories, or stories that ended, but they could add an additional adventure in for other, like Enterprise or DS9 and Voyager. So I really enjoyed it, and really getting those scenes, those homecoming scenes, and the comics did have a few of those at the end, because in a way we kind of know what happens at the end of the comic since we saw this episode, but it was a nice way to ending that and providing some additional color to the finale from, back in the late 90s. So I enjoyed reading them. And I think probably with, we've talked about the sort of the state of Star Trek in the next few years. I think comics may end up being like an additional, even more of an additional medium for people or fans to read and consume, since we won't have that, have the TV or the movie yet, but that's the comics is a sort of a good way, because it has that visual medium that the books doesn't have. So that would be additional, and they're having all these additional series that's coming up. So so it was really fun to read that again and revisit those characters.
And how much of and I will confess, I have not read I've read the books, the book version of Voyager Returning Home. Read that many years ago. Haven't read the comics. How much does the comics have the sort of like homecoming-y bits? Because as I look at part of the reason why I haven't like rushed to read it is because as I look at the covers, I get the sense that Voyager ends up going somewhere else that isn't Earth as part of the story. And so it's like, is it the homecoming stuff, or is it just sort of another story that then delays the homecoming stuff to be on the end of the comics?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It's a little bit more the latter, in which, even though it's homecoming, the homecoming is a small portion of the five comic series. So most of them is the sort of one more mission, before the actual homecoming. So, and I think that's where what I mentioned about Scorpion, it actually reminded me a little bit of Scorpion, which is one of my favorite Voyager stories. So you're right. So it's sort of one more mission, sort of one more little bit of a save the world type thing, or save the universe, mission, and then they have the homecoming part of it. So that's kind of how it is structured. But even that, I guess when I first saw it, seeing the title, I guess I was hoping to a little bit more of the homecoming part, and they, like I said, they include that, but it's definitely not that's more like the B in a way, maybe the the B story, while the A story is the first several issues. So that's kind of how it ended up. So
yeah, it's like the homecoming stuff's difficult to write. I mean, the books had the same issue too, where as a standalone story, B'Elanna reuniting with her father and Tom Paris reuniting with his father and Seven of Nine meeting her aunt for the first time and Janeway getting promoted to Admiral, like figuring out how the Maquis get treated. Now they're back in the Alpha Quadrant. That's what I want to see, but it feels like that's always a B plot, not an A plot.
Yeah.
And so you have to come up with some kind of A plot. Like, I want a whole issue about B'Elanna Torres returning home and, sort of reconciling with her deadbeat dad, right? Like, but they're never going to write that because I'm the only person who's going to buy that, like.
It's not a sales, sales by sales. It's not
it's not quite the sales magnet as like the Borg or Species 8472 or the Hirogen would be. Whereas I'm like, no, now is the time for us to work through our familial trauma.
And you have 7, 8 characters that each have their own,
right. Yeah.
Own things that they had to work through. So
exactly.
That type of that.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those things from Endgame that I kind of felt it was like, oh, if we only had that extra 15 minutes to like the epilogue, like in Discovery, a little bit of that little thing at the end. So they did, at least they did that in comic form to add to the book form of Homecoming. So
sure.
We have that.
All right, let me tell you what I'm feeling good about Star Trek this week. And longtime listeners will know that I have a small but mighty collection of original props from the various different Star Trek shows. I've got stuff. I think the only show that I don't have anything from at this point is the original series and Starfleet Academy. I got, I think, at least one original item from each of the other live action Star Trek shows. But I added a piece that I'm absolutely thrilled about in the last couple of weeks, which is I have a DS9 phaser and a DS9/Voyager tricorder, and I've got a Cardassian disruptor, and I've got like esoteric stuff like the 602 Club menu from the Enterprise episode First Flight, and I've got tribbles, I've got, all kinds of different like little button pads, I've got one of the Enterprise keyboards, I've got a Duck Tug, the Klingon knife, I have one of the side tables from Janeway's quarters. And, I have this nice little collection. I guess also a rather large now collection of badges and patches and insignia and that kind of thing from the various different shows. But there was one item left on my list where I was like, if I could only add one more item to the collection, this is what I would want it to be. And I got it. And it is a Star Trek Enterprise communicator, which is a design that I love. And there was one available in a recent prop store auction, and I grabbed it. And it's so cool. First of all, this one, it's actually a modified version of the toy that was made by Art Asylum in the early 2000s, because by the time you got to Enterprise seasons 3 and 4 and they like dramatically cut the budget for the show, they were buying the toys and modifying them to be used as the props on the show because they didn't have the budget to like build new ones from scratch anymore. So I got this in, and it's very, very cool. It came with one of the holsters that went on the uniform, and I, have sort of traced it like even though it's a modified version of the toy, number one, it is heavily modified from the toy. It's been repainted, the electronics have been changed out, but I was able to match it to a very specific lot that was sold in the official studio auctions from the late 2000s. And it's great, and I'm thrilled. And it's like, if I never got another Star Trek prop again, which I'm not promising not to do, but if I never got another one again, I would be very happy, because that was the last thing on my list that I was like, oh, I really want a version of this. I really want an Enterprise communicator. And now I've got an Enterprise communicator, I got a phaser, I got a tricorder, I got a couple of different pads. You know, I got the Klingon knife. Like, I've sort of rounded out the like iconic stuff in Star Trek, and it's a good feeling to have got to that point.
Right. Oh, great. Hey, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've been waiting for that sort of that last piece of the puzzle that you've been putting together in your collection. So having it, holding it in your hand, knowing it's something that, you know, that someone, an actor or somebody that have actually used it on screen, you know, on the film, you know, and now you have it. And so it's a sort of a great feeling having that collecting bug to adding that to it. So
yeah, I've talked about this a little bit before in more detail. I think on the like Trek Profiles interview I did with John Krikorian years and years and years ago. But the thing that I really like about owning these props is they are the closest thing to the real thing that will ever exist, in that there's never going to be a phaser, because Star Trek's not real, right? So, like, there's never going to be a tricorder. There might eventually be a device that functions in a similar way, but it's not going to be that thing, because we don't live in as much as I wish we did, we don't live in the Star Trek world, right? Or maybe, given that we're in 2026 and we know World War III is about to happen in the Star Trek timeline, maybe it's a good thing we don't live in the Star Trek timeline, although, who knows, the current timeline might be worse. But, so, knowing that, like, Star Trek isn't real, a phaser from the show is the closest you're ever going to come to like actually touching a real thing from that universe. And so that's why it means so much to me to own these things, because it's like Star Trek made real and tangible in a way that it is otherwise completely inaccessible by virtue of the fact that it's a fictional television show. And for me, that's just really, it's a way that I can have a physical connection to the actual place where the Enterprise flies through space and all these characters are real, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
And I mean, also the, you know, all the workmanship, all the craftsmen, that designers who
totally, yes,
created these designs and created these mock-ups and original versions, and then you know, all those people who were involved in it over the years, and you could sort of see the evolution of a phaser from TOS to Academy and the tricorder and etc. So you have all those sort of touchstones, and like you said, these things are iconic. You know, like you could just have a show Star Trek communicator, and people will, even if they don't watch the show, they might say, oh yeah, I've kind of seen this, you know, over the years on something, on a birthday card or something like that. So yeah, so it's great that you have that, and kind of but now you sort of start thinking about, oh, if I had one more, you know, item
right, yes,
get, what would it be? You know, something to think about. It's not over yet.
It's never over.
Yeah.
All right, well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
Well, Star Trek Strange New Worlds has a premiere date for its 4th season. Paramount Plus announced this week that Season 4 will debut on Thursday, July 23rd, that being the opening night of San Diego Comic-Con, and run for 10 episodes through Thursday, September 24th. The announcement was made at CCXP in Mexico City, where cast members Rebecca Romijn, Ethan Peck, Celia Rose Gooding, and Paul Wesley appeared on stage alongside a new 1-minute teaser. Let's give the teaser a listen.
I have ever been prone to seek adventure and to investigate where wiser men would have left well enough alone. Space is limitless in its beauty and in its terror. You can do everything right, and sometimes things still don't work out the way we'd hoped.
Any of these missions could be on Ost.
Let's boldly go.
Make sure there's heat and oxygen waiting for me.
I will do my best.
The footage includes Uhura climbing the exterior hull of the Enterprise near a black hole, a planet populated by what appears to be dinosaurs, La'an, Noonien and Singh surrounded by seemingly dead crew members, Kirk both embracing Spock and crying out in apparent anguish, and Scotty in peril inside a Jeffries tube. New photos from the first 2 episodes were also released. Episode 401, titled Valus Marinaris, features Captain Pike, Dr. Mabenga, and La'an in an undercover mission that appears to take place on a desert world with a distinctly Old West aesthetic. Episode 402 is titled Griffin Incident. Peter, are you excited for the July 23rd premiere of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 4?
Yes, very much so. So 3 months to go and can't wait for seeing new Star Trek. So really very timely that the teaser dropped on the show yesterday. So definitely interested. I mean, I really enjoyed the teaser. It was kind of piqued the interest. It gave all the sort of some action scenes, but didn't really give a lot of information about the different stories, which I think is a good thing. You know, I don't want to be spoiled too much, but they definitely sort of whet the appetite for what season 4 is. So I think it was a pretty good trailer. I'm definitely looking forward to. I mean, the dinosaurs was interesting. I didn't hear that one before, so I said, okay, I'm curious how they're gonna do that. And then they have sort of the other different scenes that provide some strange new worlds type stories. So definitely looking forward to it. And I think it should be a good season for the show.
Yeah, it's a pretty understated teaser, which I appreciated. I mean, you definitely get the sense of like, okay, I can start seeing the sort of 10 episodes, right? You know, the Old West episode, the episode with the dinosaurs, the sort of horror episode with La'an. There's going to be at least one more Kirk episode, the episode with Uhura at the black hole. Yeah. So, you sort of get just kind of a flavor of what each of these episodes might be. Nothing from the Muppet episode, which I think is probably, or at least no obvious Muppet episode footage, which probably is wise given,
that's a good thing.
the reaction that people had to Strange New Worlds Season 3 taking very big genre swings, but the show is still the show, right? It's a show that's going to be 10 different Star Trek stories with sort of 10 different hooks, and one of them's the Old West and one of them's dinosaurs, and etc, etc, etc. So like Strange New Worlds is still Strange New Worlds. It's just, I think I got the impression from this trailer there was sort of a sense of saying we're sort of reeling this back into maybe a slightly more serious show than we got in Strange New Worlds Season 3, which had a more mixed reaction, I think it's fair to say, than seasons 1 and 2 had.
Yeah, and I think I saw when I was last on, we were talking a little bit about Strange New Worlds Season 4 because it was the end of Strange New Worlds Season 3. In the fall, and looking at the notes, they're voting that the showrunners, they mentioned they were aiming for Season 4 to be a little bit more serious, more cohesive. I think was both the words they used as well. So, now we actually see the trailer, and I think they, at least so far in the 1 minute we've seen that. I think they're aiming to do that pretty well. So, and I think you mentioned the sort of a little bit of a horror episode theme. There was that one with La'an scene, and then right next to it was the one in the engine room with a lot of like I call it zombies maybe. Yep. And then there was the following clip was with Kirk, screaming while the turbolift door was closing or something like that. So I kind of thought they were all part of the same episode will be that episode. So kind of like took bits and pieces and kind of create a sort of a little bit more of a thematic progression for the season. So, and also I noticed the Vulcan cadet that was in the 4-minute clip from New York Comic-Con. She was operating the transporter in the teaser with Scotty at the end. So she might kind of be a recurring character. So, that was another continuation of it. So, and I think one little thing is I noticed the quote that Pike said at the beginning that started the teaser. It sounded like something from literature. He said, I have ever been prone to seek adventure and to investigate where wiser men would have left well enough alone. So it actually comes from Edgar Rice Burroughs in his novel A Princess of Mars. I think John Carter. I had never read the stories, but John Carter, I think the lead character in those series of novels, and that was it came from that novel. So Pike was quoting him, or the writers were quoting Edgar Rice Burroughs with that one. So I thought that was a nice little applicable quote from a fellow genre author.
It's a fun teaser. It's fun that we have Summer Star Trek coming back, and it's nice to sort of have something to look forward to in Star Trek, given a lot of the focus over the last, couple of months has been on bad news and question marks about what comes next, more than, hey, there's new episodes on and this is going to be great. 964 episodes is about to become 974 episodes of Star Trek, and that's very exciting.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it, and see if there's any hopefully some more news in the next 3 months as we get closer and closer to the opening day. Yeah.
Well, switching from the fun news to maybe the less fun news, there is more evidence that the curtain may be closing on the Kurtzman era of Star Trek. All the physical sets from Star Trek's most recent productions are now gone. TrekMovie confirmed through multiple sources that the Strange New Worlds sets at CBS Stages Canada have been dismantled. This despite showrunner Henry Alonso Myers indicating as recently as March that they were still standing and potentially available for a proposed spin-off. The Starfleet Academy sets at Pinewood Studios in Toronto have also similarly been struck, along with remaining assets from Star Trek Discovery, which was filmed on the same stages. Paramount is disposing of many of the production assets through a series of auctions framed as a celebration of the 60th anniversary of the franchise, with a portion of proceeds going to the charity DoSomething.org. The sales are being conducted by 403 auctions in Toronto, but they carry a significant restriction for international collectors. They won't ship, and bidders must either be Ontario residents or place a deposit through a Canadian bank and collect in person. 2 auctions have already completed, with a third confirmed, featuring lots ranging from shuttle sets, I think I saw the entire turbolift set from Starfleet Academy, futuristic pedestal beds, to the USS Discovery Ready Room desk. For collectors outside Toronto, Prop Store is also currently running a parallel online auction focused on props and costumes from Star Trek Discovery. 340 lots in total, including hero costumes from the principal casts. Prop Store, fortunately, does ship internationally and is a little easier to bid from, so if you are finding that you have money burning a hole in your pocket and you want to spend it on modern Star Trek stuff, and maybe you don't have space in your house for an entire Starfleet Academy turbolift, Prop Store might be the option for you. That auction is open now and runs through May 12th at propstoreauction.com. Peter, what was your reaction to the news that the sets for Starfleet Academy and Strange New Worlds have now been dismantled?
Yeah, I think pretty sad. I think with pretty much all fans, I'd say. And I think that was a strong indication that the future wouldn't be this era or this direction. So I think once they announced that they were dismantling the set, and you saw the pictures, online of kind of empty space, or mostly empty space, I think that was a pretty strong indication. So definitely sad but there was a strong indication that that pause that we've been talking about from the Paramount and the owners of the franchise, that they're going to probably do that. And so the year one or the legacy and those types of ideas, because I think if they were to continue that idea, then they would keep, because they would just continue the Strange New World set or continue the Picard season 3 sets and continue that. But now that they're all in part of an auction, then that would mean that it'll be something else. So definitely a little bit sad. It's probably similar to, I guess, in a way, we didn't when TOS ended at the end of the 60s, it was much different. It just kind of ended and we didn't really see these things. Even I guess when TNG ended, it was the movies, and then you didn't see it as much, I think, as here when everything is just a lot more public and available online, and people talk about it, people post things, and then you kind of see how sort of a series or an era, actually more of an era, winds down. So that's kind of where we're at. But yeah, we'll definitely sad, but also we're glad that we did have these last 9 years, because there was definitely a lot of Star Trek during these 9 years, and to help revive the interest in the franchise and get new fans.
Yeah, I mean, nothing is certain, but I think there's 2 very strong sort of takeaways from the news about the dismantling of the Strange New Worlds and the Starfleet Academy sets. Number one is that Star Trek Year One, the proposal that Akiva Goldsman and Henry Alonso Myers had put forward for a Captain Kirk show as a successor to Strange New Worlds that would sort of fill the gap between Strange New Worlds and the start of the original series is not happening. That was likely only a realistic option if you were just going to then keep using the Strange New World sets. And I guess there's nothing stopping them from building a whole new set of sets that look more like the TOS Enterprise to sort of like bridge them together. That feels like an awfully expensive proposition for what amounts to a filler show between two existing Star Trek shows. So I think we can probably close the books on conversations about Star Trek Year One. I think the second implication is that Starfleet Academy Season 2's finale, however it was shot, is going to be the finale. When Star Trek Discovery got cancelled at the end of its 5th season, and it got cancelled after the completion of filming for Season 5, and they had written Season 5 season finale not as a series finale but as a season finale. So then they all went back and shot the coda to Star Trek Discovery Season 5, which, you know, whatever you think about it, I'm not a huge fan of it, but whatever you think about it, like, does provide sort of a way of closing out the show. That's not happening for Starfleet Academy because there's no sets to film on anymore. Again, not completely out of the realm of possibility. You can do a lot with, you know, a green screen and CGI, but I think if something like that were happening, we probably would have heard it, which sucks because from everything we know, they ended Season 2 of Starfleet Academy on a cliffhanger. Now, maybe they can go, maybe they can go back and recut it so that it's not a cliffhanger, but I do think we all have to get ready for the likely reality that Starfleet Academy Season 2 does not provide a satisfying ending to the show in the way that I would argue Season 1 does. It's so funny that, like, if you watch Season 1 of Starfleet Academy, that finale, first of all, it's a great season finale, but actually the way it ends with, like, all the, like, class pictures from the actors is a pretty decent series finale. So we are getting 10 more episodes of Starfleet Academy, but I'm a little scared about what the series finale is going to look like. And, you know, this sort of very strongly says the series finale they shot is the series finale they're going to air, that there isn't going to be much that they can do to address the fact that they wrote a Season 2 finale and not a series finale for the show, which is a huge bummer, but I guess is what it is.
Okay. Oh boy. I didn't know that Season 2 might be ending in a cliffhanger, so it's like, oh wow, okay. If they,
that's what when the Season 1 finale premiered, there were lots of interviews with the showrunners about, you know, Season 1, and lots of people asked about Season 2 and them just having finished filming Season 2. And I think Noga Landau in a couple of places said that they, because it was in the context of being asked about how confident are you about a Season 3? And Noga Landau and Alex Kurtzman were like, we're so confident we made the Season 2 finale a cliffhanger. And it's like, no. Now we know that confidence was somewhat misplaced because the show has been cancelled. So I mean, it will be interesting to see what they are able to make of that last episode. I mean, we know nothing about it, so it might be one of those like massive cliffhangers that's just going to last there forever. It might be a small cliffhanger. They might have been pulling our leg. Like, it might be editable. Like, we just really don't know what that's going to be. But the one thing we know for sure is it's not a series finale that they wrote.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll see. I guess it wouldn't be, I guess they couldn't do the Discovery route if they knew that they would be pulling down the sets. It's sort of just like have a couple of people come back type thing and just have a short.
I think if they had done that, we would know about it.
We would know it. It would sort of spill.
Right. Because I think in that letter from Alex Kurtzman and Noga Landau and the cancellation of the show, they would have said something like, and we're going to, you know, ensure that Starfleet Academy gets the send-off it deserves. Because I think when Discovery got cancelled, they pretty quickly came out and said, don't worry, we're filming something extra to turn the series and finale into a series finale, so like the show's gonna feel like it closes out. But we just haven't heard anything like that for Starfleet Academy, and the speed and vigor with which they dismantled the sets indicates to me that was not, that was not in the cards for SFA in the way that it was for Disco.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll find out in a year or so what's going to happen. But like you said, if maybe through, like you said, through editing or through green screen or through something to at least, even if it's a short little segment, just to acknowledge that it's a series finale to append to the season finale, then something. But I guess it's just the nature of streaming these days. It's just the nature of the business these days that this type of thing could happen and I guess the other TV shows having sort of cliffhangers because they didn't realize it would be canceled has happened from time to time, and I guess this will be probably the kind of the Star Trek version of that phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Creation Entertainment has announced a 60th anniversary Star Trek convention in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the first time the company has brought its long-running convention series to Philly. The event takes place November 14th and 15th, 2026, at the Sheraton Philadelphia Downtown Hotel, and is being billed as part of the franchise's ongoing 60th anniversary celebrations. The guest lineup includes Kate Mulgrew and Jerry Ryan from Star Trek Voyager, Nana Visitor and Terry Farrell from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Denise Crosby from Star Trek The Next Generation, and Melissa Navia from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. 3 further guests were announced this week: David Ajala, who played Cleveland Booker in Star Trek Discovery, Todd Stashwick, who played Captain Shaw in Star Trek Picard, and Bella Shepard, who played Genesis Live in Starfleet Academy. Weekend general admissions tickets start at $99 and are on sale now at creationent.com. The Philadelphia event is positioned as a second anniversary option for fans who cannot attend Creation's flagship Las Vegas convention in August, which has already sold out its lowest tier general admissions passes and only has a few copper tier tickets left before the show is a complete sellout. Peter, will you come down from New York to Philly for this convention in November?
Well, I probably would have, except it's actually busy season at work because I noticed the date, like mid-November, which just happened to be right in the busy season. So I think I will have to end up working on weekends as well, and so I wouldn't be able to go in. But it definitely looks interesting. I kind of thought I called it like almost like STLV East from all the stars and autographs that guests that's going to be there. So it's nice that they're kind of expanding to Philadelphia. It's like you just mentioned that they hadn't had a convention in Philly before. So this will be a nice way to attract some new fans and just having another convention in a large city as well. So definitely one of the dates to circle for Star Trek fans, especially in that area.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I have bought my general admission ticket. I have booked my hotel. I will be there November 14th and 15th. The nice thing about Philadelphia is because it's downtown, there's a quick train that runs between where I live near Baltimore and Philadelphia that doesn't take very long. So it's easy for me to get to. It's the first time they've been in downtown Philly, not the first time they've been in the sort of Philadelphia area. My very first non-STLV convention was a creation event in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is suburban Philadelphia, effectively. That was 2013, I think I did that. And that was fun. Patrick Stewart was there. I mean, this was, 13 years ago at this point, while Patrick Stewart was still not just doing conventions, but doing like little creation events too, which was, that was an easy autograph to get for Patrick Stewart because it was not, it was not a particularly busy event. And I hit it exactly the right time to get my photo up with him from 2011 STLV signed, and I'm glad I did that then because he does not do that kind of thing anymore. And he does, and he charges at that point. This was right at the end of before a lot of the convention stuff really went crazy, because I remember his autograph. It was one of the free autographs you got as part of the ticket tier you got. It wasn't even like a thing I had to pay for separately, which is wild wild to think about now, because now if you want Patrick Stewart's autograph, it's going to cost you $400, and it's got to be part of some like private signing thing where you mail it off to the company, and you know he does very few every year, which is, I mean, partially for understandable reasons. He has very bad arthritis, so you know, signing stuff is probably
Signing is hard.
Signing is hard because he's talked at length about his use of cannabis products to manage his arthritis. But yeah, so exciting that I'm very pleased that Creation's doing an East Coast convention this year. They've been on and off in doing those conventions, and this is the 60th anniversary, and it would suck if they had, you know, just done Las Vegas this year. So nice they're doing an East Coast event. Nice that it's pretty easy for me to get to. And nice that it's, you know, also like not right after STLV. Because that's the other thing. Sometimes when they do the East Coast conventions, it's like STLV in August and then, you know, an East Coast convention in like early September. And it's like, that's too close. I'm still, you know, I'm still riding the high from STLV. So it'd be in November, a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, I think will be, will be nice.
Yeah, I remember they do some like New Jersey convention, like Parsippany.
Yep, they did. They did that last year. Yep.
So
they did Parsippany
right
last
September.
year. They did Secaucus, New Jersey the year before. So yeah, northern New Jersey, and this time Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
No, that's great. Actually, I was curious because I was checking the website to get ready for the podcast, and I couldn't tell if there was like panels or talk for this convention, or maybe it's just too early to schedule it because I couldn't tell. I saw a lot of autographed guests, but I was just looking at the sort of the program, and they didn't. I couldn't see them, so I was just wondering.
They only released the schedule for creation conventions like a week before the convention happens. But yes, it'll be like a main stage that the guests will be scheduled to like do Q&A and panel stuff all throughout the day. And
like
they're also signing. Yeah, it's a miniature STLD.
No, that's great. They're doing that. Yeah. And actually, a quick story. I remember my first convention when I was getting into Star Trek was also Creation in New York in Manhattan. And this was in the 86, 87.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and sort of the early years of Star Trek convention.
I mean, TNG's, you know, not even on that
Not even on there, right? You know, it was just like, you know, they talk about the preview of TNG or what the plans are. And then, I mean, the big thing was, the voyage home, and then the movies.
Yep.
And I think it was the tail end of my first convention was sort of the tail end of the phase in which you don't even have different tiers of tickets. Like gold tier and the silver and the bronze. It was essentially just sort of one ticket, and the autographs. You didn't, like you said, you didn't need the special autograph ticket for the guests, but you did have to stand in line. So there was just like huge line because it was just part of the admissions, and it was almost sort of one tier. So it was a little bit. It was definitely a different time, but it was a fun time. It's fun time seeing. I remember like Star Trek, like music videos of clips of, and this was before the internet, so you have music videos and. I mean, you had the trivia and you had the costumes like they have now, and you have these like, paper programs that you could like pile of paper at the front table that you take. So, but it was always fun seeing that all these different things and dealer rooms and all these different things. Because back then, before the internet, you didn't have all these different ways of interacting with the fandom. So going to a convention is, one of the ways in which you could do that. So it's grown a lot and, continues to be strong after so many years. So definitely have a great time. Are there any like autograph guests? I was just wondering that you're looking for, or do you getting autograph, or you want to looking for any props that they might be selling over there or something like that?
So I sometimes like to get I'm mostly a photo op guy, and I typically will do most of them in Las Vegas just because the setup for the convention's great because it's all in the same hotel. So like I can go up to my room and change and go back down again. Whereas for the East Coast ones, it sounds like this one's gonna be in the same hotel, but like sometimes it's in a completely different. You're at the hotel, but the hotel's across the street from the convention center where the convention is. So normally but the thing I hate doing in Las Vegas because there's so many people there is autographs. I hate standing in line. I'm not like autograph motivated. I'm not really an autograph guy, and so like standing in line and spending a lot of time getting autographs doesn't interest me. But if someone's sitting at their table and nobody's there, I like to get my like photo op with them signed.
Okay.
So I will normally do that at the smaller conventions. But it'll be the kind of thing where I'm just sort of like wandering around and tables open and I'll dive in and be like, hey, nice to meet you. Love to get this signed, blah, blah, blah. But for me, the photos is the big thing that I like.
Okay. Okay, oh, interesting. Yeah. It's interesting how every fan kind of have a different, niche or a different, special like sub hobby part of Star Trek. So for you, it's photo, the photo op part of it. So yeah, that's great. Well, definitely have a great time on it there.
Well, and lastly this week, another 60th anniversary reference book has been announced. Star Trek Timelines, A Visual Voyage Through Generations of History, published by DK Books, is a 336-page volume covering the full breadth of Star Trek's multiverse. Not just the Prime Timeline, but the Kelvin Timeline, Mirror Universe, and aborted chronologies like Voyager's Year of Hell and Strange New Worlds' Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, among others. The book is written by 4 authors with deep Star Trek credentials: Derek Tyler Attico, who wrote the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, Jim Johnson, and Kelly Fitzpatrick. Jim Johnson is the manager of the Star Trek Adventures tabletop RPG from Modiphius Entertainment, and Kelly Fitzpatrick is a contributor and also a fiction writer, and Michael Dismuke, who has worked on both Star Trek Adventures and the Star Trek Explorer magazine. Star Trek Timelines arrives November 3rd and is available for pre-order now via any outlet where you get books. Peter, do you think you'll pick up Star Trek Timelines?
Yeah. Actually, I think I would, because this I'm always have my soft spot when it comes to Star Trek is hardcover reference manuals.
Sure.
So this is definitely one of those ones that falls into that category. So back in the day, back in the 80s, like Star Trek Concordance, the Starfleet Take Manual, the Franz Joseph items that he did, the chronology, the Star Trek, I think the encyclopedia that the Okudas did in the 90s, all those types of reference. I always enjoyed reading them and collecting them. So I think this would definitely be one of those, one of the books I would get. And I also have one of my favorite Star Trek subgenre of episodes is the, alternate timeline, alternate universe, those types of stories. So, City on Edge of Forever, Timeless, Twilight, Year of Hell, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, all those I always enjoyed watching those episodes in particular. Some of my favorite, my top 5s and the different series. And many of them are up there. So the subject is also interesting. So I think I would get that once it comes out. Yeah, so I think it's definitely something that would be a interesting reading, and like you said, with the authors that all have a strong background in the franchise, and it would be interesting, looking through the pictures, seeing all the different how they handle all the different timelines and alternate universes together. I think it's good. So definitely something I'd get.
Yeah, I'm super interested in this one. My very first Star Trek reference book that I was obsessed with was the Star Trek chronology by the Okudas. And unlike the encyclopedia, which they updated a few times, the chronology never got an update. I think it goes through Voyager season 2. And I love this Star Trek story and experiencing it in timeline order. That might be a little bit of a hint about what a future podcast from one Alex Perry might be potentially structured around. More information coming in the next couple of weeks, but I am super interested in an updated timelines book, and DK Publishing did a Star Wars timelines book. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but I have it, and it's very, very nice. It's a very nice hardcover reference work. Now, that's the Star Wars version, but I would assume, since that was Star Wars timelines, and now they're doing Star Trek timelines, that it's probably a pretty similar style project. And so, I'm excited to see this because, as I say, I've forever been fascinated by not just Star Trek as a collection of shows made over a period of time, but Star Trek as a coherent story that takes place over now 1,000 years worth of history, and the way it all connects together and all the things that happen. So, this is I've already pre-ordered Star Trek Timelines, and I'm excited for when it releases later this year.
Yeah. And actually, I just pulled this out. This is the Star Trek Space Flight Chronology.
Oh, yes.
So this was from, I think, the early 80s, I
Yep,
believe.
that's pre-TNG.
Yeah, definitely pre-TNG. It kind of looks like it pre-TNG. So very, a little bit black and white, but it had all these different spaceships, fictional spaceships. Some of them, which I don't even think appears on Star Trek. So it's a little bit of a beta
There's a lot.
yeah.
It's like half official stuff and then half sort of like extrapolated fan prediction-y type stuff.
Yeah.
But it's very good.
Yeah.
That's a fun read. Yeah.
So some these types of books I think always have a soft spot for them. So yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we've talked about the facts, and now let's offer our opinions on the Star Trek franchise.
Your opinion has been noted. Anything further?
So as we transition from the news section to the opinion section, each week my guests and I will give you a Star Trek opinion, wish, or theory that we're nurturing that week about any aspect of the Star Trek franchise we want to opine on. So Peter, let's hear it. What's your big Star Trek opinion for this week?
Okay, Alex. I actually like to stay with hardcover reference manuals for a little bit longer. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And wanted to talk a little bit about the Star Trek, the Illustrated Handbook.
Yes.
Which is published by the Eagle Moss Hero Collector. And they did all the Starship collection. So they also have a line of hardcover reference manuals and a few different series. And the one that I really like is the Illustrated Handbook. And so
they did one for the TOS Enterprise. They did one for
Defiant. For DS9.
At DS9, they did one for Voyager. I think they did one for the Enterprise D as well.
And Enterprise D. Yeah. Right. And so they had these, and then they stopped. So I guess with the Starship line ending and just the changes in the company.
I think the bankruptcy of Eagle Moss sort of put a stake in doing everything. More of those,
anything. But I hope that at least the concept of it or something can be at least continued in some way, because like I said, I always have a soft spot for hardcover Star Trek reference manual, and this is probably my favorite of the sort of the current era, of the more recent era. And I was watching when I was getting this, I was waiting for that NX-01 one, for Enterprise, and given all the problems that the company had ended before they did that. And then also now we have these new shows that they haven't, like we talked a little bit about before, with the current Discovery on. I mean, there's some various reference manuals as well, but maybe not as much as considered the sort of 90s Trek when this was more common, or maybe just different time, different era, but there's a little bit less on things. I mean, there's like the art of Discovery and the art of Lower Decks. So they have that series, but that's a little bit more on the production side of it rather than the sort of the in-universe material side of it. So I'm hoping that one day somehow that there'll be something that talks about the in-universe, all the different technologies, ships, all the different components that we see on screen. So it was just a nice series, and it's something that I kind of miss when that stopped and that's not really available anymore. But perhaps one day, there'll be something. I think with Strange New Worlds and with even like COD, even Lower Decks, even Prodigy. Something to have that for the fans who are interested in that type of thing. So yeah, it's just more of a wish, a wish to have that one day.
My favorite thing about those illustrated handbooks is that they, for the first time, published in book form a set of content that had been included in the Star Trek the magazine that had run in the early 2000s, the like big thick one that ran for like 3 years. And before that, the reason that I had interacted with it was the Star Trek Fact Files in the UK, which was this Part Works release where each week or every 2 weeks, I can't remember how often it was, it might even have been every week, there was this release, and it was these like binder pages that you would sort of pull apart, and then you would file into these different, I mean, I've got them all in in my storage room because my parents brought them all over from the UK. But the thing so a lot of the text that had been written for the Fact Files that was then reused for the Star Trek magazine here in the US is then reused again in those illustrated handbooks. But the thing that from the very first Fact File issue I picked up, I absolutely loved and still absolutely love today, is the diagrams that they included of the bridge and other major, like, you know, there's one of engineering, there's one of that's right. Yeah. The engineering, there's one for the TNG ones, the ones I remember best. There was one for the conference room, one for the captain's ready room, one for the quarters. And I would sit staring at those diagrams for hours. I absolutely love them. I love them so much that when these illustrated handbooks came out, I really wanted to do like a deep dive TrekCore article on these diagrams. And I actually did a set of interviews with people who were connected to the fact files and connected to like people from like artists for the fact files. And I never was able to do anything with it because there was still a couple of people I wanted to talk to, and I couldn't get them to agree to do an interview with me because they were very busy. But it was really great kind of revisiting that and talking to some of the people who worked on that kind of thing, because that's like one of those sort of things that like made me a Star Trek fan. And so yeah, like but I love the fact that that content was republished in a hardback book format, because previously the only place you've been able to get it was in those Star Trek magazines or in the fact files, and now there's like a you know, nice shelf presence to it.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. No, I didn't really know some of that history. I know in the US back in the 80s and 90s, we had this like Star Trek like official magazine, but it was more like pictures and posters and episode summaries, you know, that type of focus. So it didn't have like this type. I mean, there was some other smaller ones, but it wasn't as sort of slick and colorful and visually as much as the fact files is and these books are. So I'm glad they were able to combine them, consolidate them, and now, you know, like you said, we have these available for these 3 or 4 series, and hopefully one day some more. But it's a wish.
All right, let me give you my opinion for this week, and that's kind of circling back a little bit on the set dismantlement from the last couple of weeks. My opinion is that I think the chances that the Kurtzman era of Star Trek will end with Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 5 once that's released in the summer of next year has probably increased in my mind from, I would say, about 70% to maybe 85%. The fact that they have dismantled the sets for Strange New Worlds and Starfleet Academy and done it very quickly after the conclusion, the decision to end the show without there being any production of any new Star Trek content having been announced, and there just being Strange New Worlds seasons 4 and 5 and Starfleet Academy season 2 being next, and the fact that there's been, since the cancellation of Starfleet Academy, effectively radio silence from Kurtzman and crew, and from Paramount Skydance, the only thing they've talked about was at CinemaCon last week, confirmed that they are still working on this Star Trek movie concept from, I forget the guys' names, but the guys who did Dungeons and Dragons and wrote the script for Spider-Man Homecoming. But they didn't really talk more about, I mean, it's not like they would have talked about Star Trek on television there at CinemaCon. It was a movie theater owners convention to get them excited about what's coming up for movie theaters over the next couple of years. But I just sort of, it increasingly feels like the curtain is being drawn in on the Kurtzman era, which is not to say that Star Trek's going away, you know, or anything like that, but just that I think with no announcements for Kurtzman era shows, with the possibility of future Kurtzman era shows having their curtains drawn on them year one, likely no longer being a live sort of project possibility with the dismantling of the Strange New Worlds sets, just all feels like we are moving in the direction of, at some point this year, getting an announcement that Alex Kurtzman will be exiting as the sort of creative controller of the Star Trek franchise. The odds of that feel like they have increased some more over the last couple of weeks. I don't think it's 100% certain. I think there's, you know, always possibility that there are things happening or conversations happening that we don't know about, or, you know, the relationship between Skydance and Secret Hideout being different than how it looks from the outside. But I think, you know, just looking at everything that's happened, you sort of have to potentially walk away from that with the conclusion that things are the way they are. And that's, how things are going to be. We'll obviously still have to see. Nothing is certain, but it does feel to me like the odds of this being the end of the Kurtzman era have increased a bit more with the news about the destruction of the sets for Strange New Worlds and Starfleet Academy. So yeah, I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah. I think you're right. Reading the article about the sets, it just gives more evidence or just more suspicions that it is the end of the era. And I was kind of thinking about it as well, and that it's in a way it's kind of understandable in that you have new owners and they want to sort of put their stamp on whatever, not just Star Trek, just the whole, all the different offerings of shows. So in a way, so it's really hard, once you have like turnover and have new owners, they want to have that sort of a dividing line between what was and what will be that they would have more control over. And so, and I think, with his Kurtzman's contract, I guess is due to be up anyway, that it would be the time to make that decision, make that break, and I think maybe it probably will be a pause. Hopefully not as long as the one after Enterprise to Discovery with the 12 years or so.
12 long years of no Star Trek on television.
No Star Trek on television, just 3 movies, and that's about it. So it was kind of relatively quiet back then. So hopefully it'll be a little bit shorter than the 12 years if it's just like a couple of years, just to find out what the new owners would want to do and how they want the franchise to proceed. So I think that's going to be, I would probably say it might be more somewhere in the 90 to 95% range, that it will be like that, especially with all these this news, and as well as sort of the lack of something contrary to what this news is. So I think it would be, but it was also a good run. Like I said a little bit before, I really enjoyed these
200 some episodes of Star Trek.
Yeah, from 2017 to now. It's, like any franchise, like any show has its ups and downs. Some shows are, I like more than other shows, but they're all Star Trek. And I think, I think all shows has the sort of that Star Trek DNA, sort of that spirit of Star Trek. They express it differently, to different audiences. You have Prodigy for the younger audiences, and you have, the comedies, and you have the more serious ones, and you have the episodic versus serial, all the things we've talked about over the last, since 2017. But I think it definitely, getting more interest, bringing fans in, sort of reviving Star Trek after those 12 long years. So I think it was a good era. And, during those few years ago, we had like Star Trek every week, I think, or almost.
Sure. Yeah. There were a couple of years where we had, out of 52 weeks, we had, 50 some episodes of Star Trek.
Yeah. So, and so we have all those, all in the archives, all ready to watch and rewatch again. So I think that's, kind of, thank to the, everybody who was involved in it over the last, since 2017 to get to where we are today. And then looking forward to what's going to happen in the future. I think there will be a pause. But like you said, I don't think Star Trek is going away as a franchise. I think sort of this era maybe, but I think it'll still be back. It'll be back. And so, I think we'll be ready. Yeah, waiting for that.
Do you have an opinion, theory, or wish about Star Trek that you'd like to share? Email them to me at weeklytrek@trekcore.com, and I might feature your thoughts in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Peter Hong, for joining me today. Peter, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Alex. It's really great to talk Trek with you today. In order to continue the conversation, the best way to reach me would be on Blue Sky, and my handle is at PeterTrek1, the number 1. And I'm also the host of the Trek Book Club on Blue Sky, where we read and discuss Star Trek novels approximately every 6 weeks. And you can just find out more information just going to at Trek Book Club on Blue Sky.
And you can find this show on X at Weekly Trek, and me at Alexander T. Perry on X, and at Alex T. Perry on Blue Sky, Threads, and everywhere else. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And for all your Star Trek news needs, in addition to our extensive media archives of all things Star Trek, I hope you will keep your senses locked to TrekCore.com. Well, thank you, Peter. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper. Weekly Trek is a production of TrekCore.com and owned by Trapezoid Media, LLC.